Hi, I'm Josh, and this is my life partner, Jake. We talk basketball, we talk fantasy, we talk more trash per minute than Draymond Green. In this video, we are doing a tier list, trying to figure out who the top 12 to 15 players in the NBA are and what tiers they go in. We're going to just do it how the Yahoo image sorter did it. These images were pulled off of Google. Jake, are you ready? I'm going to give you the first one. It's Trey Young. Where the hell does Trey go? Is he S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, or D tier? For those kids, actually not the kids know this. For the boomers watching at home, S tier is the best. It's like Superman. It's the best of the best. It's elite. A is good. B is okay. C is and D is bad. Jake, where are you putting Trey Young?
Well, if you're making me choose Trey Young first here, I'm going to put him in the D tier. I think there are plenty of guys here who are better than him, both in reality and in fantasy, that are many tiers above him. So I think he warrants that final tier.
Okay, so Jake, I'm not trying to be contrarian, but I think this is a bad take. I think that as we put the rest of these players in, you're going to realize that there's a lot of players worse than Trey Young. Trey Young last year was in a weird share with DeJounte Murray. Murray now plays for the Pelicans. We're going to see Trey Young unleashed. I think that this guy is C tier, but that's why we play the game. Agree to disagree. Jump in the comment section. Where do you have Trey Young? It's already time to go to the next one, which is Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum is going to be D tier for me. Jake, you want to know why?
You're putting him in the same tier as Trey Young? That's
Put him in the same tier. I have him behind Trey Young for this year. Here's the reality. Jason Tatum had a piss-poor playoff run. He had an even worse Olympics run. And he's on a team with not only the deepest and most versatile team in the NBA, but Jaylen Brown is going to be on a mission this year to seek and destroy. Jason Tatum is in a shooting slump. We don't know if it's injury-based, if it's confidence-based, but his career is not on the upswing. I am not taking Jason Tatum ahead of most of the guys on this list. I made the mistake of going for durability with him, and I picked him sometimes in like the 8 to 10 range last year. Not happening again. Jason Tatum, I banish you to the D realm. Do you want to attack that take, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, coming off a finals run, he's like 25, and he's been in the finals or conference finals for like 4 years in a row. I mean, and then he played in the Olympics, so there's definitely some wear and tear on him. The idea that he's durable, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be true from now to the future. Just because it has been doesn't mean it will be. So, and that's why people tend to take him in that like mid to late first round spot. But his per game numbers are much worse than that. So I think per game he might end up below Trey Young. The problem with Trey is you have to punt field goal to make him even a viable first round player. So with Tatum, you don't necessarily have to punt anything, and he's still a pretty good 9-cap player.
Okay, I like that take. All right, the next player that we have coming up, Kyrie Irving. What tier do you want to put Kyrie Irving?
For fantasy purposes, I'm going to bump him up to that B tier. I think health is something that we talk about a lot with drafts, and it's very important, but it's also unpredictable. Kyrie has missed a lot of games throughout his career, but per game numbers, he's always in the first round. And he just doesn't hurt you anywhere. He's an incredible positive in both percentages, gets those defensive stats, scores a lot, like doesn't really turn the ball over. He's an awesome fantasy player. So the only concern is injuries.
Yeah, I mean, he was the 8th best player last year in per game value, and he was giving you a Z score that was in the range of basically everyone up until Victor Wembanyama. Then there's a whole tier jump in terms of per game performance. Kyrie is going to take the Mavs as far as him and Luka can this year. You got to be a little worried not to do foreshadowing about Luka's ankles and his ability to stay healthy. And you figure any game that Luka goes down, Kyrie's going to go supernova. You're looking at a top 4 player. All right, yeah. Let's get to the next one. James Harden. This is my pick. If there was an E tier, I'd have him in E tier. But we're going to put James Harden back in the D tier. Now, I'll walk you through my thought process. James Harden is not a guy that takes care of his body. This is a guy that is famous for hitting up strip clubs super late at night. He's started to become an injury liability. I understand that Kawhi Leonard is no longer on the Clippers, and therefore there should be some usage.
Kawhi Leonard's still on the Clippers.
I'm sorry, Paul George. I'm sorry. I understand that Paul George has left the Clippers. I was just a week early with Kawhi Leonard's on. Wait for his retirement to be announced. I'm sorry, guys, we weren't supposed to drop that. You heard it here first. Kawhi's probably going to retire. Actually, if Paul George and Kawhi are gone, yeah, if we're talking about potential first rounders here, I don't think I ever see James Harden in the first round. If something happens in the next month between now and your draft, and like Kawhi is going to miss like 3 or 4 months with a surgery, I think you could bump him up to C tier here, and move him just lightly ahead of Trey Young. But when we play fantasy or even in real life, if I was a GM for one season, I don't want to take an old guy unless he's LeBron. The only old guy I feel perfectly comfortable with is LeBron James. And LeBron is so old, he's not even on this tier list. So I'm betting against James Harden. Would you have him any higher?
So I actually totally disagree with you. I think Harden was the 26th player in per game last year. He played 72 games, and his usage rate was 20. So that's because he had Paul George and Kawhi. Kawhi actually played 68 games, so they overlapped for most of their games. He didn't get that many games without him. So if you're looking at Harden without Paul George and a little bit of a usage bump, if he gets like a 3 or 4% usage bump, it might be more than that. But if he gets that, and then in the games where Kawhi misses, he was 26 overall last year, only taking 11.5 shots a game. So if you bump that up a little bit, you're probably looking at a top 15 player in fantasy, just because Paul George is gone, with some upside from there. So I would actually put him in the same tier as Kyrie Irving.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay, so we'll split the difference. And we'll put him in C tier.
I mean, I've seen him go pick 12 in some mock drafts.
Okay, we'll come back to it. Your turn. Giannis attempt a free throw.
Giannis is definitely the most polarizing player because of his free throws. We did a Giannis punt mock in the last video, and it's just so hard because you have to build your team a certain way. There is no other player in this list who forces you to build your team a certain way, with maybe the exception of Sabonis, but Sabonis tends not to go in the first round. So you're forced to do this one specific thing. For that reason alone, I'm going to put him in the B tier instead of, like, if you're just talking about NBA players, who's the best players in the NBA, he's top 5. But if you're talking about in fantasy, it just makes it so hard.
Now, do you have him ahead of Kyrie or behind Kyrie in this B tier?
I would put him ahead of Kyrie because if you look at punt values from last season, if you're just straight up punting free throws, Giannis is the 4th best player. So it forces you to build your team a certain way, but if you are going to build your team that way, he's pretty awesome.
Another thing that I'd like to point out, just something to consider here, is let's say you're getting Anthony Davis at 5. That is a different tier than if you're getting Anthony Davis at 10. If Anthony Davis falls to you at 10, that could be an S tier pick. If you're reaching for Anthony Davis at 5, that could be a C tier pick. So it is not just the player, I think, but if we are talking fantasy, it's where you're getting that player consistently. For that reason, I would have Giannis lower. I think you're going to have to reach top 6 to get him this year. And I think that he comes with so many negatives and he forces your hand, especially in Snake. In auction, I think it's less bad. But in Snake, he forces your hand in subsequent rounds. If you take Giannis, you're going to end up having to make a bad pick in like rounds 3, 4, or 5 because there's a guy you really need that fits your build, and you're going to have to reach 4, 5, 6 picks early to get him because you can't afford to go without him. And I just don't like that from an optionality standpoint. So I'm out on Giannis. I would have him lower. I would have him still B tier. I think there's going to be a lot of room in B tier, but I would have him behind a player like Kyrie. If I'm getting Kyrie at 11, I feel way better about that than Giannis at 5. Okay.
Yeah.
My pick, Kevin Durant, going to put him slightly ahead of Jason Tatum and behind Trey Young in the D tier. It's kind of self-explanatory. Only old player that I really fully trust is LeBron, and LeBron's not good enough anymore to make the first round for fantasy. Durant is going to be sharing time with Booker and Beal. He played in the Olympics, which I don't love for an old person. Durant has an injury history. He's maintained health, but the Suns are so thin. He's going to have to be a two-way player. Like, the Suns are not good enough for Kevin Durant to just play offense and chill. He's going to have to be guarding big men, getting blocks, and getting rebounds for them to win. And those are all ways for the slender man to get hurt. So I love Kevin Durant, but mostly from a usage and an age and an injury and wear and tear concern, there's a lot of guys that I'm going to take ahead of him.
Yeah, he did play 75 games last year, and he played over 37 minutes per game. I'm looking at it here. That was fifth in the league in minutes per game. And only one player played more games than him, who played more minutes than him. So he was pretty durable last year. Career, not so much. So you never really know. But I think something that people aren't talking about with the Suns, which I listen to a lot of podcasts and mock drafts and people talking about fantasy, and I haven't heard anybody mention the addition of Tyus Jones and what that's going to mean for the Suns. He is not a ball-dominant point guard, but he is somebody who needs the ball in his hands to actually be effective. And I think it's going to drop the assist numbers of Durant and Booker, but it might not necessarily drop their scoring. So I just think it's going to affect them in some ways that we're not talking about. And, Durant averaged, let me pull it back up. Durant averaged 5 assists last season. Booker averaged 6.9. I could see both of those coming down by at least 1. And then maybe their scoring goes up because Tyus Jones is finding them in the right spots. But the Suns added somebody who they just didn't have last year, and it changes the dynamic of the team.
Yeah, it makes them smaller.
Well, Tyus Jones is replacing Grayson Allen's spot, right? Like that's basically
That's smaller.
The lateral move. But for offensive purposes, you're totally changing the dynamic of the offense from a 3-point shooter off-ball player to an on-ball player who wants to pass.
No, I get that. I'm not worried about Durant on the offensive side of the ball. I'm worried about, what is he, 36 or 37 now? Coming up 37. On 37? Yeah, I do not like the idea of a 37-year-old playing defense in an NBA season, in an 82-game NBA season.
Yeah, I mean, the injury concern is definitely there. I was just talking about his change in offensive role. But give me the next player.
All right. Whose turn is it? I can't even remember.
It's my turn.
Anthony Edwards.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the other Anthony. Anthony Edwards is among all of these players in terms of fantasy.
I just put him in D tier.
he is in D tier, and he's last for me in D tier. I don't like. I think he's an awesome actual player.
All right, so Edwards gets his own tier. This is a trash pick. The hype on him is unreal. I don't get it. I don't even think we really need to do an analysis. Like, we did it last year. And by the way, some of you guys have been like, where are the videos from last year? The way the YouTube algorithm works, when you do fantasy basketball videos, it treats the channel like a news video. Like, this is what Tuesday's weather's like. No one is interested in Tuesday's weather after Thursday. And so 99.9% of people don't want to watch it. So we have unlisted all those videos, the hundreds of hours of videos. If you're not a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe. We'll probably have subscriber-only videos or member-only videos later. We won't charge you guys for it, but there's got to be a way for us to organize talking about fantasy while still talking about the broader NBA and being cool. Okay, but we talked about it last year. Anthony Edwards would have to get better at everything that he's ever done, and his play style just doesn't fit a first-round pick. So I think we agree on that. Any other comments on Edwards?
No, there also isn't really a punt that you can do that makes him a first-round player.
Yeah. From a real-life perspective, he's probably one of the top 6 or 7 most exciting young players in the league. From a fantasy perspective, he's trash. He's ass garbage. Okay. It's my pick now, and I'm going to be selecting Dame Lillard. I'm going to put Dame slightly ahead of Anthony Edwards in this new category. I'm glad we went for another tier. This tier was necessary. Yeah. This is an incredibly necessary tier. It was going to be weird if we just had 5. Now that we have the Edwards category. The reason Dame is higher than Edwards is because if you put him into punt field goal percentage, you put him into punt blocks, punt rebounds, he becomes a monster. Even last year, incredible down year for him across the board. I'm pulling up the punt calculator real quick, but if you picked Dame 9th, 11th last year because that's where he was consistently going, and you punted blocks and field goal percentage, he had the 7th best season. And LaMelo Ball is there at 6, and LaMelo didn't even play. So you got a top 6 performance in the 9 or in the 12 slot. That's not that bad. Dame has a lot of upside. He went through the divorce last year. He could potentially be on the uptick. I don't hate Dame at all. Outside the first round, middle of second, which is where this E tier is. Any thoughts on that, Jake?
Yeah, I like that. And I think what you said earlier in the video, if you look at it where a player is being drafted, he's probably a higher tier if you're getting Dame at the end of the first or at the end of the second round, as opposed to Tatum, who's going in like the 7 to 9 range in drafts. That's probably a better. You're just probably getting better value from that. I like that you talked about his punt value. That's really important, and he adds something, a dynamic in fantasy that a lot of players just don't do. Like he's kind of the rare free throw monster. Like they're just last year, if you look at free throw monsters, it was Embiid, Lillard, SGA, and then like a little bit Booker, and then it really drops off from there. Like the Z-score of Lillard was twice, he was second, and he was twice the Z-score of the, what is that, 3, 4, 5, 7th best guy. So he was really outstanding in that, and that's not an aberration. That's just what he does for his career. So you get a really big boost in something that is pretty rare, and that's kind of a fun way to build your team.
Awesome. Okay. This one should be pretty interesting. Tyrese Haliburton, one of the favorite players of the channel. We've been high on him for a long time. Where do you have him, Jake?
Yeah. I'm going to put him in the B tier ahead of Giannis.
Ooh. Not A tier.
No, I don't think he's quite there. I think there are a few more guys who are really a cut above him and 2 cuts above him that he just doesn't quite make it in there for me. But, I mean, maybe that's because my S tier is only going to be 2 guys, but that kind of changed things.
Here's my argument for why Haliburton should be in the A tier. His current ADP is 7.2. He had a much reduced season last year due to injury. I would expect him to be healthy. All indications are he's going to be healthy for this full season. You're getting a player that was going 4th, sometimes 3rd last year, but consistently 4th. And you're getting him 7th or 8th, and he's young, and he plays in a fast-paced offense, and he plays on a Pacers team where the regular season matters, and they're just going to go for it. I mean, he's clearly, this is his floor. I think the top of the B tier is his floor, but I would sneak him into the bottom of A, personally.
Okay, it's kind of splitting hairs.
I don't like seeing him next to Giannis. Makes me uncomfortable.
Well, he's going after Giannis. Actually, that 5, 6, 7 in drafts is Davis, Giannis, Haliburton, and there's almost no differential there. Like their ADPs are so similar.
I get that on ADP. People are stupid, though. It's not about ADP. It's about value from that pick. You are giving up nothing. Getting Haliburton at 7, you have full optionality for the rest of the draft. You probably pick the player who's going to lead the league in assists. It's either him or Trey Young, probably. You got the guy that's going to lead the league in assists. You don't have to sacrifice anything. You don't have to punt anything. And there's upside. Giannis is already maxed out. We're not going to see another unlock from Giannis. I mean, maybe his free throw percentage could come up 5%. But yet, Giannis is not going to unlock a new aspect. He's not going to start shooting the 3 ball at volume. It's not going to happen. All right, we are splitting hairs. Joel Embiid, E tier, bottom of it. My next pick is going to be Steph Curry. Let's talk about that. Steph Curry is tough for me. I definitely have him ahead of Harden, for sure. I don't think I can justify putting him. Yeah, I think Steph Curry is going to be the elite of the C tier for me. It's an age problem. He played in the Olympics. It's the same analysis that we did for Durant, right? Loved it for Team America. Hate it for my fantasy team. You're too old, too much mileage. Not even really sure the direction of the Warriors right now.
Yeah, and the Warriors did not get another shot creator, so they're relying on him again to create their shots. He had a 31 usage rate last year, which is really high. He's pretty old, like you said, and his steals were oddly low last year, so if those can come up, he'll push up in the rankings. But he was the 23rd ranked player, so he wasn't even close to the first round by his normal standards. But he's just so outlandish in threes that, kind of like Lillard, you get that huge boost in one category, which makes team building a lot more fun.
Okay. This should be easy. Victor Wembanyama, it's your pick, Jake.
S tier, but to me, he's second in S tier.
Spoilers. All right. White Victor Wembanyama. This is harder. You know where I have White Victor Wembanyama? It's interesting.
I was wondering who that was.
Yeah, it's Chet Holmgren, but Victor, maybe he's Victor Wembanyama, Gringo Wembanyama. I don't know. Victor Gringo Nyamba. I'm trying too hard now. Pterodactyl looking motherfucker. I could make an argument here for him in D tier if you're getting him at like 16, 17.
Yeah.
If you're picking Chet middle of the second round, then that overall value is clearly higher than these E guys. Chet probably has room. I don't love Isaiah Hartenstein and the contract that he got coming to the Thunder. Or maybe it unlocks Chet. Maybe Chet doesn't have to get beat up by the other team's biggest player, and now he can roam help side, right? Like, there's a lot of question marks, all of them good. I think we've already seen Chet's floor. A little bit of an injury risk there, but yeah, he's a guy that in a year or two will be a first rounder for the rest of his career as long as he's healthy. Jake, anything you want to say on White Victor Wembanyama?
He's an interesting player for head-to-head because he doesn't really stand out in anything except blocks, and he just kind of helps you a little bit everywhere else. So for Roto, I think he's a monster. For head-to-head, it's kind of tough to pick him in the mid-second round because he's not a high point scorer, and that tends to be the area of the draft where points come off the board really fast. Somebody takes Donovan Mitchell or Devin Booker in the second round, and you take Chet, you're at a huge disadvantage in points. So that's really the only issue I see with him in that range. I think value-wise, he'll probably be a mid-second round player throughout the season, but it's hard to build around him in that range of the draft. But he could make improvements, right? Like, he's young. This is going to be his second full season. He played all 82 last year. He got a nice playoff run. He's gaining experience. Like, he might take a leap and then end up being a first-round player. I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay, so where do we put SGA?
SGA is in the A tier for me. He just barely makes the cut, I think. Like, I could totally see him in the B tier above Haliburton, so he's kind of right on the borderline. He was pretty awesome last year, but he's also a tough build. I've been trying to practice drafting him with that because he's going fourth in almost every draft. So you draft him for you kind of have to punt threes because you're so far behind in threes unless you really make up for it in the second round. So I had a team last year with him and Booker, and I just couldn't figure out how to make it work because he's just such an odd fit. He scores a lot of points but doesn't shoot threes.
Yeah, I definitely don't hate SGA in that fourth slot. You're right that there's not a lot of upside on the punt. Let's take a second to tell you thank you so much for watching the channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This video is brought to you by Hardly Legal. Check out the YouTube channel Hardly Legal. It's got yours truly as the host. Guys, I quit/was fired from my job to go all in on this channel. It is very financially important to me. A subscribe there would mean the world to me. If you have a legal question, you want to talk to some lawyers and comedians for free, check out Hardly Legal on YouTube. You can also sign up at hardlylegal.com. Okay. We got Donovan Mitchell, Cleveland Cavaliers. Feels like he's in between Tatum and Chet for me.
I was thinking the same thing. Look at that.
Okay. See, this is getting easier, actually. If we agree, I don't think we even need to do the analysis. Let's go to this one. Will be tough. This is tougher. Anthony Davis.
For me, that one's not tough. I'm going to put him in the A.
Ooh, okay.
Tier. I actually wanted to make this comparison on video. I haven't heard it yet. I heard somebody allude to it, but Anthony Davis is very similar to Victor Wembanyama in his stats. Wemby was a worse field goal percentage and blocked a lot more shots, which is going to kind of be the case for him versus everybody. You just can't really make a comparison with the blocks. But other than that, Davis was a high shot blocker, and it's eerily similar stat sets to each other. So I think if you're drafting Davis at 5 to 7, you're getting a poor man's Wemby, which I would take that.
Yeah. Anthony Davis is tough here. I was looking at him sandwiched in between Haliburton and Giannis. That felt right to me. But I mean, I think it goes back to where you get him. Are you getting Anthony Davis 8th because a lot of players are afraid of him? Or are you picking Anthony Davis 5th or 6th? That matters. It really does matter. And I think where you're picking him changes his tier status. If AD falls to me at 9 or 10, I'm going to go A tier pick all day. But it'd be really tough to. That 5th slot is hell. That 5th slot this year is the absolute worst, having to stare down the barrel of Anthony Davis and Giannis. 2 players that you could get around the turn last year. You could get them in the 9, 10, 11 spot last year. I'm not really sure what happened. I guess it was depreciation of a lot of guys like Steph Curry and KD, age. But those guys are now the best you have in the 5th, 6th slot. Doesn't make you feel great. All right. Your pick or my pick? My pick. Sabonis. I would have Sabonis behind Donovan Mitchell and ahead of Chet.
Okay.
I could even see him ahead of Donovan Mitchell.
I was going to put him behind Chet, but splitting hairs.
Each in the middle. Okay. We only got 3 players left. This might get contentious. Let's see. Nikola Jokic, best player. I don't think we need to do that. We're down to Luka. Is Luka A tier ahead of SGA, behind SGA, or is he S tier?
Luka, to me, is S tier unless your playoffs coincide with his 2-game week. And if that's your finals week, or maybe if it's even your semifinals week, it drops him down to the A tier, but still ahead of SGA. So I still think you have to take him 3rd, but I think it drops his auction value a little bit. He's just such a monster in so many categories. And like last year, we talked about how it was hard to build around him because of his free throw percentage, but that came up enough that you can do it now. So he just doesn't really have flaws, and he's just so good at the things that he's good at. So I would take him 3rd in any draft.
So Jake has Luka 3rd in any draft. Remember, it's a tier system, so it's not just where will you pick them, but is it a good value? This is a gut feeling. I don't have a ton of analysis to back this up. I feel like he's there. I feel like he's the middle of the A tier. And my reasoning for that is he's a little heavier than you'd like. He started to pick up lower body injuries. Different lower body injuries. Let me say that again. Different lower body injuries. It's ankle injuries, then it's like calf soreness, then it's knee soreness, hamstring. He's acquiring lower body injuries. I do not think Luka has the motivation to go to another gear in the regular season. I do not think he does. I think Luka turns it on in the playoffs. And I don't think Luka is a guy that, like, he's a top 500 player in Overwatch, okay? The game comes easily to him. I think, unless something has changed from what I've seen from Luka, I think he lacks the maturity to lock in, be in the best shape of his life, and take his game to another level for the regular season. I think he's going to tune in and show up when it matters. The flip side of that, I think SGA is a machine. I think this guy lives in Oklahoma, and all he does is play basketball and watch game tape. I think he's one of the closest players to Kobe in terms of mindset that I've seen. And I would argue that you're going to more likely get more games out of SGA. And if anyone on this top list besides Wembanyama unlocks another level this year, I think it's SGA, actually. So I'm not low on Luka. Luka's so firmly in that top 4. I'm just saying, and Luka might even be 3. I'm saying if we're doing the tiers by value, I think 7 out of 10 times this year, SGA ends up being a better value at what price you get him at auction and what draft pick you get him at sync.
What are the stats in your mind that put him above Luka? Because SGA has the elite steals advantage, sure. And he's got a slightly better field goal percentage, but I guess it's pretty massive, 53.5 to 48.7. And he's got the turnovers advantage. But like Luka has these just crazy popcorn stats: 4 threes, 34 points, 9 rebounds, 9.8 assists. Like it's like
if you were playing 9 cat last year, Joel Embiid was the number 1 player. and we all know he's E tier. But SGA over the entire year and per game was the second best player. He had a .99 Z-score. Luka was only a .74. Now, I get that if you do punts, you move that around. And I get that one of the things that really carried SGA and that difference is his low turnovers. But to me, SGA was already there. Like in terms of everything that he's doing, if he starts taking more threes, which there's no reason that he doesn't, if he ups those assists a little bit, to me, there's things that have been untapped in SGA's game. Yeah, Luka could improve his free throw percentage, but you're probably punting free throw in a build with Luka. Luka's not going to take his assists from like 10 to 15. I just feel like his usage rate can't go higher.
Yeah, he is what he is.
Yeah.
Which is awesome, but he is what he is.
And we're talking, and I want to make something clear. I'm not trashing Luka. I live in Dallas, Texas. Hit me up in the comment section if you guys want to come to a Mavs game with me this year. We'll make it happen if you guys live in Dallas. Yeah, I think you could make an argument. But you know what? I think if we're talking about the rest of the world, I think this is what it looks like. That's the 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
This is your 4, 5. Maybe these guys, maybe people will be lower on Hallie, but this is the Trash Talk channel. We're believers in Hallie here. Guys, jump in the comment section. Let us know what you think. What picks were bad? What picks were good? And if you watch this long, yes, obviously, Joel Embiid analysis was a joke. Okay, let's give them some bonus, real serious. Gun to your head, Jake. Where would Joel actually go? He's obviously not the worst player here. Gun to your head.
Are we talking about in fantasy? I would probably take him at the end of the B tier. Just because of injury. If we knew he would play 65 games, he's in that S tier.
Yeah. Gun to my head, that looks right. Gun to my head, that looks right. And this is assuming that Embiid starts the season healthy. I would pick him if I was getting him in the 9-10 slot. Wait for him to be the best player in basketball for 2 weeks, and then I would trade him. It's actually what I did last year. All right, guys. That's going to do it for this episode of Tier List. Tell us in the comment section what other kind of videos you want to see. Don't forget to follow us on all platforms. Trash Talk out.